Alright, let's get right into it. We're diving into one of the most critical questions that Muslims need to ask themselves. Do you really have the original Qur'an? Because spoiler alert, what most Muslims are holding in their hands today is the Hafs Qira'at. And here's the kicker. The Hafs Qira'at isn't even one of the original 7 Ahruf. Now let's break this down. According to Islamic tradition, the Quran was revealed in 7 Ahruf, different modes or forms. Now here's where things get tricky. Scholars have debated for centuries about what exactly these Ahruf were. Some, like Ibn al-Jazari, argue that these Ahruf represent different dialects or recitations. But others, including al-Suyuti, suggest that these Ahruf involved deeper variations in wording and meaning. So where are these Ahruf today? The truth is we don't have them. Some scholars, like Ibn al-Jazari, say that these Ahruf have been lost over time. Others claim that maybe 1 or 2 might still be around, but not in their entirety. And then there are those who argue that we might have some remnants, but again, not the full picture. Al-Nawawi and al-Suyuti both acknowledge that we no longer possess all 7 Ahruf. So if the 7 Ahruf are gone, what do Muslims have today? Enter the Hafs Qira'at. The Hafs Qira'at is the most widely used version of the Quran today. In fact, about 95% of the Muslim world uses it. But here's the catch. It's not one of the original Ahruf. It's a later development, and what's even more interesting is that the Hafs version wasn't universally accepted until much later in Islamic history. In 1924, a committee in Cairo chose the Hafs Qira'at as the standard text, which led to the printing of what we now call the 1924 Cairene Quran. Now, this version was derived from earlier manuscripts, but here's the bombshell. Nowhere can we find the original Quran that the Hafs Qira'at is supposed to come from. It's like trying to trace your family tree and finding out your ancestors' records have vanished. Now, let's tackle the big question. How can Muslims claim that the Hafs version is the word-for-word preserved speech of Allah if they can't prove it with the original Quranic manuscript?
Our claim, the Muslim claim, has been for the last 14 centuries that the Quran is absolutely word by word preserved. Word by word.
And frankly, the Quran has been preserved, we believe, word for word, letter for letter.
Whatsoever that the Quran has been preserved to the letter.
If the original Quran in its full form with all Ahruf is nowhere to be found, how can anyone say with certainty that the Hafs Qira'at is what was originally revealed? And it doesn't stop there. The different Qira'at, which are recitations or variations of the Quran, don't just differ in pronunciation. They contain contradictions in meaning and instruction. Let's look at some examples. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:184, it says, the Hafs version says, and for those who can fast with difficulty, they have a ransom, feeding a poor person. But in the Warsh Qira'at, it says, and for those who can fast with difficulty, they have a ransom, feeding poor people. Singular versus plural. Now, this changes the instruction completely, and the context makes it even more important. Surah Al-Baqarah 2 verse 191, the Hafs version says, and kill them wherever you overtake them. But in the Duri Qira'at, it says, and fight them wherever you overtake them. Kill and fight are not interchangeable. These are completely different commands. Surah Al-Imran 3:146, the Hafs version reads, and many a prophet fought alongside large bands of men. While the Al-Bazi version says, and many a prophet was killed alongside large bands of men. Did the prophets fight or were they killed? That's a massive difference. Now, Surah Al-Baqarah 2:271, in the Hafs version it says, and it is better for you, and he will expiate from you some of your sins. In Al-Susi version it says, and it is better for you, and we will expiate from you some of your sins. So is it we or he? This changes who's doing the action. It's significant. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:140, the Hafs version asks, or do you say that Abraham and Ismail and Isaac and Jacob and the tribes of Israel? While the Warsh version says, or do they say that Abraham, Ismail, Isaac, and Jacob and the tribes of Israel? Now, are these words being directly addressed to the listener or indirectly about others? Again, this changes the meaning entirely. And if that wasn't enough, let's talk about the number of surahs. Did you know that there was disagreement among early Muslim scholars about how many surahs the Quran should have? Ubay ibn Ka'ab's Quran had 116 surahs. Ibn Masud's Quran had 110 surahs. Ibn Musa's Quran had 114 surahs. So which one is correct? The standard Quran today has 114 surahs, but what happened to the versions with more or fewer? This raises serious questions about the integrity and preservation of the text. Now, some Muslims might point to various manuscripts as proof of the Quran's preservation, but let's examine these claims more closely. The Sana'a manuscript. Now, these are often held as some of the oldest Quranic texts, but here's the problem. They contain variations from the current Quran, and they're written in a palimpsest. Now, meaning there are layers of text. This suggests editing and changes over time, which directly challenge the claim of perfect preservation. Now, furthermore, the Sana'a manuscripts do not contain diacritical dots, which are essential in distinguishing between different Arabic letters. The absence of these diacritical marks can lead to multiple readings of the same text, further complicating the claims of a perfectly preserved word-for-word Quran. Let's look at the Birmingham manuscript. While it's dated close to Muhammad's time, it's only a small fragment and lacks context. It doesn't cover the entire Quran, so it can't be used to verify the whole text. Like the Sana'a manuscript, the Birmingham manuscript also lacks diacritical dots. This absence means that there could be various possible readings of the text, making it difficult to assert that it represents a single preserved version of the Quran. Now, the Topkapi manuscript, often claimed to be Uthmanic, but even Dr. Tayyar Altikulac, a leading Turkish scholar, has stated that this manuscript is not from the time of Uthman. It's much later, and it too contains differences when compared to today's Quran. The Topkapi manuscript also does not have diacritical marks in its earlier form, which means that the text could have been read in multiple ways. This lack of diacritical dots again raises issues with the claim that the Quran has been preserved word for word, as different interpretations could have existed depending on the reader. Now, you might be wondering, how big of a deal are these diacritical marks? Well, let me give you some examples. In Arabic, this word without diacritical marks can mean several different things depending on which diacritical dots are added. Over here, it means he knew. Over here, it means he taught. Over here, it means flag. And over here, it means world. Now, imagine reading a Quranic verse without those marks. The meaning could change drastically depending on how the text is interpreted. This ambiguity further complicates the narrative that the Quran has been perfectly preserved, word for word, since its revelation. So here's the dilemma. If the original Quran with its 7 Ahruf is lost, and the Hafs Qira'at, the version most Muslims use today, has contradictions with other Qira'at, how can it be claimed as a perfectly preserved word of Allah? Muslims are told that the Quran has been preserved word for word, letter for letter, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Muslims, I'm posing this question to you. Do you honestly believe that Allah protected the Quran when what you have now is a text that isn't the original and contains contradictions across different Qira'at? Is it time to reconsider the narrative that's been passed down? Because if the original Ahruf are gone and the current Qira'at differ from one another, what exactly is being preserved? Now it's time for some serious reflection. Preservation isn't just about having a text that's been passed down. It's about having the exact text that was originally revealed. The Quran's preservation claim is on shaky ground if the original cannot be found and the current versions contain contradictions. So what will you do with this information? Will you continue to accept the narrative without question, or will you seek the truth? Especially when your book affirms my book 16 times. I have manuscript evidence. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have the Codex Vaticanus. We have the Codex Sinaiticus. These were pre-Muhammad's time. We can see now they have not changed since then. come to Jesus. He's waiting for you.